What's your soul purpose? It's what you came here to accomplish. It's also who you're meant to become so that you can make an impact by being yourself. We're all here to unlock our potential and create positive change in the world. Everything starts with you. One is not born into their purpose, one steps into their purpose. Were you born to do it? Let's find out together. Welcome to Born to Do It, a podcast about the positive change makers around us that are trying to make the world a better place through embracing their authenticity. My guest today is based in the jungle and he is known as Jungle Jake. So, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Stella. What an epic intro clip that is. And I'm so excited to dive deep with you.
Absolutely. And thank you. We were just chatting about embracing our inner children before we pressed go live. So, do you feel like you are fully into your inner child mode in the jungle? Or is there another level to harnessing more of your inner child?
I would say that the jungle is like my inner child's playground. When I was a little kid, actually, I used to ask my parents to keep playing the Jungle Book movie on repeat. So it's one of those like fun examples in hindsight where you sort of know, where you were going to go all along. I always loved that book, like Where the Wild Things Are, when I was little too. And also the Dr. Seuss one, Oh, the Places You'll Go. And like looking back, like it just makes so much sense. Whenever I come to the jungle, I just am like super alive. And I would say that like my inner child is just running free. There's definitely a freedom to this place, a simplicity, and there's just an abundance of life, right? So, I mean, if we want to talk about inner child, you should see the way the little kids live here, right? They run around the village. They're like that mischievous, like inner child spirit is just like fully wild. And it's so safe because it's a small village. So like they're kind of like, able to run free, do whatever they want all the time. So I think the jungle really has that inner child energy. And for me, I get so excited just around nature. When I was little, what I used to do at lunch recess all the time was just like go to all the edges of the playground and like where it reaches the forest and like go off school property a little and like get in trouble. But and just be catching like grasshoppers and praying mantises and snakes and anything really. And there was just this thrill of like, I think my inner Venus and Aries slash sun that's on the Aries cusp and Mercury and Aries, it's like hunting for something and like chasing it and getting excited and everything. And the feeling of discovery. So that's something actually really important. I think that discovery is the most exciting thing, like to me in the creative process, and like discovery in nature. For me specifically, just how earthy of a soul I am. I just love that. I can't get enough of it. And so that's also something that I think my inner child is really excited about in the jungle, is that when we talk about discovery, like there's so much to be discovered that like we really still don't have much of a clue about at all. And a lot of the, I guess, corners of the world are sort of explored and well trodden, whereas this is a place where you'll literally encounter things that like people might not have encountered before. There's still in this region, further away, deep in the jungle, but there's still tribes of people that are uncontacted, right? The Peruvian government tries to keep that pretty quiet because they like to give permission and rent like parts of the jungle to these big like logging and also oil companies who are searching for oil under the jungle. So they just like deny the existence of these people pretty much, but there's so much evidence, and you can meet people here that have seen them and that describe them and stuff like that, right? So that's a small example, but yeah, my inner child definitely comes alive here. And then to take it to the next level, that's when I'm like imbibing like the plants I love, like Camellia sinensis tea, cannabis, and when I'm like creating things with plants. So whether that's sitting with them and communicating with them, and I like to think of what I do as like translating what the plants are speaking, or if it's like literally like creating things with plants. So whether that's like gardening or like making new like concoctions essentially. And I'm really big on combining tea, like proper tea, Camellia sinensis, and cannabis, and like creating different interesting like synergistic blends. And then like getting really geek level, it's like I figured out a way, I mapped the terpenes. So the terpenes are like the aromatic compounds of plants. I mapped those to the constellation or to the planets, because as above, so below, as you know, I'm sure a lot of your viewers do. Um, so all plants, all life, can be mapped to different, archetypal patterns. And the planets are the biggest beings that we have around, at least in our neck of the woods, or, our part of space. And the terpenes are like further personalities. Each plant has a set of terpenes, much like a person has a natal chart that's a distribution of like almost like a musical chord, like notes, that gives like, oh, that's the Stella sound. We just hear this sound of Stella, that's her. So plants are the same, but within their personality, a lot of what makes up their personality is their smell and their taste. And when we look at traditions like Ayurveda, the smell and taste of things indicate the effects that they have, right? They indicate the energetics, whether something is, drying or moistening, or whether it's heating or cooling. You can map all of that to planets as well. So when we try to understand a plant really deeply, we start to have all these music notes, which are the terpenes, and there's tons of them. But in certain plants, there's like predominant ones. And the same way in Ayurveda, you can classify them based on their taste and aroma. You can do that, and you can understand. You have to experiment a little bit, but you can understand like and figure out, okay, like this particular terpene, like limonene, is aligned with the sun, for example, and the effects as well as the organ affinities that they have, like which organ systems, because the organ systems are also ruled by the planets. So it's like a missing key essentially in the world of botanics. And so that's what I figured out like this year. And now I'm doing like things like I can take your birth coordinates and I can tell you like which cannabis strain is like the mirror of your soul's expression, and which one would like best balance you based on like your tendencies to become off balance and stuff, just like we do in Ayurveda or those sorts of things. So that's like, if I crank it to the nth degree, that's when like my inner child's like, whoa, and yeah. So anyways.
It sounds like you're co-creating with the universe, and you're co-creating with the universe's child on earth, which is nature. And there is something very beautiful about the personalization that you're talking about, because I believe this is the future, and we've already seen that across industries, that we're personalizing the way that we're exercising, the way that we're approaching studying, even where the schools are a little bit more progressive, how we're personalizing our healthcare plans. But maybe we get that personalization from birth, where we are assigned spirit animals and spirit plants and things that make our existence a little bit more holistic, where we get to develop that telepathy from the very first beginning, the very first few months of our beginning onto Earth. And through that telepathy, to remember why we're here a lot faster. Because most of us, I believe, we have had many incarnations here. So we have past life experiences that help us figure out what are the keys, what are the missing puzzle pieces that are bringing us back onto this playground called Earth. But as you were talking about you having a playground in the jungle for your inner child, was there a moment in your previous life, the life in the city, where you brought Jungle Jake before you officially embody that identity? Were there like bursts of adventurousness within you that you wanted to carry everywhere you went?
100%. Great question. Gave me chills. So since I was very young, I pictured this like arc of like the way that my life would progress, which was like I would achieve society's definition of success. For some reason, I wanted to do that. Maybe it's like, you feel you're blessed with certain gifts. You want your parents to be proud. I don't know if it's that, or it's just like a chip on your shoulder. but I also have that Capricornian, that like Aries competitive side, the Taurus. And as you're working with those archetypes, like, you know, there's a spectrum of expressions and vibrations to them, right? And so I always was like, I felt this like huge drive to be an entrepreneur and like build a business and do something like profound and like impactful and big, you know, in scale, right? This like ambitious side. But then I also equally was like disenchanted with what I saw of the modern world from a really young age. Like I would have these, like I was pretty little, and I remember just sitting on the floor in my room and having all these thoughts and almost being like borderline, not like depressed about it, but just like, whoa, I could see where this goes, and it doesn't go anywhere, like it doesn't end anywhere like positive for people, like this current iteration, like, you know, this game, the setup of this particular game, like I can play this game, but if I play this game, like it's going to end like this, and like none of those are what seems to be interesting or enjoyable or worthy of experience to me. But like that's the path that, like, if I follow achievement and whatever, it's going to lead to that. And so I felt this from a young age. And then, but I also was like, at some point there's going to be a change, and I'm just going to go off and like do something mystical or in the wilderness or something like that. I had no idea what it would be. So I had that since very young, and I knew that I would do something like that. And at first my idea was like, I'll make a bunch of money and then I'll go do like the far out thing or something. And then I've always had like a green thumb in that. So one little cool moment happened when I was really little too. A maple tree, there was one of the seeds that flew down and get like chills. And then I caught it in the air before it, and then I planted it in my grandma's like flower garden, like at the front of her house. And then it grew into like a maple tree. And I remember she was like so excited because she's like, oh, you have a green thumb, Jake. Like, oh my God, you know? And that meant, I remember I was like, yeah, like I love that. Like like just being told that and that identity, I was like, it just made me so happy. Like, and it was such a simple thing. So I loved plants. I loved going up north fishing with my dad. Nature. I was always like one with nature, and people would see it everywhere. Like whether I was on a family trip, like in the Caribbean, somewhere on like a resort, you know, as like North American families will do. You know, I did a bunch of those when I was little because my mom like loves that kind of thing. And then I'd be like finding all the crabs and like putting them on my head and like, you know, like letting them bite me and like bite my nipple, or, you know, like crazy things, and just, or like going scuba diving and like finding like barracudas or like, or snorkeling at that age. So yeah, always loved nature, but there was always like, people could tell nature loved me too. And that like we worked together kind of, even fishing. Like when I would fish as like a younger kid, I'd picture, I'm like, where are the fish? Like I am the fish. Like where's the fish in the water? Like if I could see like a highlighting glow right now of where the fish is, where is it? Like, and I would act like as I'm fishing, I would pretend like I'm the fish seeing, you know, the lure and stuff. And I would catch way more fish than like all the other guys, like constantly, you know what I mean? And like, it just stuff like that, right? Like a lucky side to me in nature or something, right, was really visible, and everyone would see it. And older guys who had a lot of experience in the bush, they would tell my dad like, oh, your son's like really comfortable in the bush. And I was like a city slicker by their standards because I grew up in like the GTA, right? So totally. And then more adolescent like life, I mean, then in high school I encountered cannabis, and like earlier than that, tea, and like I was just enamored by those plants, and I was like taken by it, you know. And so, and I also had those experiences, like I remember with my friend Jeremy in my shed beside our house, because you used to have to hide and stuff when it was, you know, illegal and everything. I live in Canada. I grew up in Canada. We'd be like, whoa, like the plants are talking to us. Like, what is this? Like, you know, like why are they talking to us? And we would just feel that from a young age. Yeah. And like, I wanted in high school to go to the jungle and drink ayahuasca and learn from shamans and stuff, you know, like, so it was very young that I was into all this. But then like just a funny example too, is like in Montreal, when I lived there, I was working in a startup there as a sales leader. And I had like literally collected all these crazy exotic plants, like from like, we're talking like peyote cactuses that are like super old, to like agaves, like a really old agave that I got from this like eccentric like guy who like grows all these crazy plants, and he was like moving to a new country, so he was like offloading them. Like, you know, I was growing strawberries in my apartment. Like I was growing mushrooms, like, you know, like just like gourmet mushrooms, not psilocybin ones. And like literally my bonsai trees, like my place was like, it looked like a jungle. Like it was to an eccentric kind of absurd level, like just like way too many plants, to the point where like my girlfriend at the time, and it was a small apartment in Montreal, she would keep getting poked by the agave spike that it has, right? So it's like, yeah. So I was trying to almost like make my apartment a jungle or something like that, you know, unconsciously. So yeah.
I think you have a bond with plants and animals that is kind of like a friendship. And since the beginning of your life, you were looking to play with your friends. But most people don't have that relationship. So to them, speaking with nature, speaking with the animal kingdom, to them, that's, you know, something for the fairy tales, for the stories. But when you're the one with that increased sense of consciousness, or rather someone who has built that relationship with the animal kingdom and the plant kingdom for many lifetimes, I dare say, it's just something that comes natural. And so I'd love to use the opportunity to turn our episode into a little bit of a jungle adventure that has a couple of stops where you are simultaneously the hero of the story, but also our guide. And as it happens, when we live in the city, when we're kind of disconnected from our friends or from our soul tribe, maybe, you know, our soul tribe isn't necessarily located where we are. So when we're
Mhm.
awakening, we're realizing there is something missing, there is something that's disconnected, something that's not right. So usually the first step is recognizing that we have some wounds to heal, and recognizing that the lifestyle that we're having does not really match who we want to be, where we want to go, and the impact that we want to create. So when did you realize that you had some wounds to heal? And I know for some of our listeners, they may experience wounds in the form of burnout, which is going against their purpose, their soul purpose, a little bit of stress when they're overworking their heart and placing that love across all their own areas, and mostly not giving themselves love. Then there is the trauma that comes from our ancestors, the generational trauma. There's the trauma that we carry into the childhood, and even some trauma that's stored into the DNA level that we need to heal through deep healing practices. And finally, there is the pressure that you mentioned, where you just want to fit in the standards of what's successful, and you kind of put those expectations on you. I want to make my parents proud, or my friends. So, what was the turning point in your life?
So it always takes us back to Rumi's like wonderful gem, which is through the wound, the light enters, right? And so for me, being a Capricorn moon, you know, North Node Capricorn, I know we're getting ahead of ourselves with the astrology stuff, but and Capricorn rising, like I'm pretty, and then like Taurus sun on the cusp with Aries, like it's all these rams, like these, like in these ram energies, right? Who are like very like hard headed, and who are there to endure. Aries a little less, but Taurus and Capricorn very much so, right? And so like people who are built for endurance and people who like extremeness, we're very like like we're going to go a long way off the road before we finally like get that wound that makes the light enter, because we're able to endure so much, right? So it's like a little more catastrophic sometimes, or like you're forced to a stop, you know. So in my case, I got into like a pattern of just overworking, and I guess that's like in some way for most people you're searching for like love outside of yourself, right? And approval, like your father's love maybe is what you're searching for, right? When you're like, hey, I want to like, I need to become something and be seen as talented, and I want to be celebrated and recognized for the talents and gifts I have. And it can drive you to completely like suppress yourself and just sort of search through, for a lot of us, work this love, right? So I definitely did that, and I did it in like a startup world, right, that I got involved with pretty young when I was like 18, as the first salesperson at this tech company. It was an ed tech company, turned into a SaaS company. It wasn't a SaaS company when I first started. We didn't have any money when I first started. So it was that like ground floor sort of like all right, let's pull ourselves up by the bootstraps type of thing, which appeals to me and appealed to me big time then. And yeah, I put a tremendous amount of like my heart and soul into this work. And yeah, it was an amazing adventure. I learned tons, but I think that if I reflect now on like some of the things I did, like just crazy. Like I remember I stayed up like 3 nights in a row, working the whole day, the whole night to finish this like proposal thing we had to do for this like RFP. Like at this point in my life, as much as I love myself and want to work on my own things, I would never do that, like even for myself. Right. So it's like, you look back, you're like, whoa, like that was, so I ran my health into the ground, not really having like work was my whole thing, was my identity. I wanted to like be a part of a company that was going to be big. It was a mobile app for students at a university. Facebook had like left the campus scene. This was like the days of like the iPhone 3G was like really cool. If you had that, that was like, whoa, like you have an iPhone, you know? So there is still this really like early allure of like building a mobile app for a campus. This could turn into the next, so that was all fun and exciting. I got carried away with that, I would say. And just like, it was just a way of exposing and mirroring to me the like distance that I had from myself or taking care of my own needs. And yeah, it was, like I said, I got really into cannabis from a young age. And so I was also like, using cannabis in a way of like supporting myself in terms of like comfort and energy, but like in a very unhealthy pattern, in that I would like sort of finish work, have cannabis, that would like give me so much energy and inspiration. Cannabis opens your crown chakra wide open. It's ruled by Saturn. Saturn rules the crown chakra, connects you to your higher self. You're so inspired. I'm a Vata Pitta kind of constitution. So all that like Vata energy, it's just not a healthy recipe for your nervous system, right? Because you're supposed to be like down regulating at night. You get home from work, then you're like, boom, and then you have all this inspiration. Then you like work on more exciting things because like your work is your life. And so then you're like, and then you're excited by that. And then, and it's just like a vicious cycle pretty much, right? And your nervous system never comes down to its like baseline. And if you do that for like, we're talking like a decade or more, like that really catches up with you, right? At some point, something has to give. And for me, I reached a point where one day I was just like, I used to get a lot of stomach pains. I have a really open chakra system in my solar plexus and all of that. That's like my gift, but I didn't recognize it as such when I was younger. I was always like, oh my God, I have these debilitating like gastro issues. I'd see specialists. They'd have no idea like how to help. It's like, oh, do I have like candida or like, you just don't know. You're trying to, and a lot of it was just, was too open and everything would come in. I didn't know how to like keep my boundaries. Yeah. Right. And protect myself. So at some point, I was like vomiting uncontrollably one day, and it wouldn't stop. And like, I couldn't like soothe it in any way really. And the only thing that would work is I would put hot water on it from the shower. And there's this like thing they say that some cannabis people get. Now it's not that. I didn't have that. What I ended up having was my gallbladder was full of gallstones, basically. So a gallstone had slipped into my biliary duct and was blocking that. So all the bile from my liver couldn't go down. So my body was like in a state of toxicity and just trying to like, cope and purge. And then my skin turned like jaundice. And then like, it was like a pretty, and I was so stubborn and hard-headed. Like I literally like didn't get out of the bathtub and just kept putting hot water on myself. And I wasn't like going to go to the hospital or see a doctor or anything. Like, you know what I mean? And my girlfriend at the time, she's like crying. She's like, you need to go see like the doctor. Like you have something in you that needs to be removed. Or she just kind of like knew. And then I had to go to the emergency room eventually. And like, I could hardly like walk well at that point. Like it was pretty brutal. And then we found out all this stuff about the gallbladder. They kind of like helped me like clear that out. They put a plastic tube in there to keep it more open in case more stones came. Eventually I had to go get the plastic tube removed. I did. I thought I was done with all that. I come home, you eat like the first meal after you're not supposed to eat for a while. And then it just starts again. I just start like vomiting the same thing. So the tube that they pushed up, it pushed more stones up. And then when the tube was taken out, those stones came, you know? So then I had the same whole saga over again, like just a brutal experience, right? And it's usually days before you can like get seen by the whatever. And so that was just terrible. And coming out of that, I mean, I had time to reflect, but also I was like, look, if this wasn't modern times, I would have died. Like I had a full infection. If there was no surgical intervention or anything back then, it was, you know, you were going to die. So like, that was like, okay, if I was going to die, why would like, what would I want to do? I would just want to go to the jungle and try to learn shamanism and everything like I wanted to do since before. So then I was like, okay, like I got to start like doing that. Yeah. And then eventually I like kept working in my job. Even with that, I was still like overworking after and stuff. And I could feel like I wasn't fully healed, but like, and then it was slowing down my healing. But, you know, I had those patterns that were really deep. And eventually I just felt like I couldn't continue. And I'm someone who like, I really like to do high quality work. You get this as a Capricorn, like, and that's not all negative. There's a beautiful side to that that's very genuine and pure. But like, I just couldn't really do the work anymore that was in front of me. I just, there was nothing that could make me do it. I just felt so done with it and stuff. So then I had to leave and, yeah, and then I left, and that shortly after that, I went down to the jungle basically. So that was the intense, I guess we touched on some of the categories of pain there in
It
that one.
absolutely is true. And I have questions, but before that, I do want to share that when I first saw that story, because you posted on LinkedIn, I was like, the same thing happened to me. Only I didn't have gallbladder stone, I had kidney stone. But the way that it's really interesting. I was trying to live healthier. I was going to the gym, I was exercising, I had my job, I had my university, everything was great. Everything was great, right? This is the moment when you least expect to get attacked from within, especially from your body. Mm-hmm. And I woke up around 5 a.m, and my voice, because I'm always connected with my parents, it was like, you're gonna go to the hospital, so get ready. And I was like, oh my God, what? And I realized this is something that I've never experienced before. So I called the emergency. I was like, this is what I'm experiencing. They said, okay, go to the center. We're going to get you an emergency appointment. And I was vomiting like you the whole day. And they told me this is because I thought it was like the, what do you call that? Where you have a really acute pain and they have to take out a part of your body. I can't
remember. Yeah, like your spleen or something. I think.
Not the spleen, but one of the organs that's kind of useless. And so every now and then it might get inflamed.
They say that about the gallbladder, but I think it's a spleen too. But guess what? There's no organs that are useless, people.
I know,
like they're very, very important. And I know you know that, but yeah.
But pretty much they said,
the gallbladder.
Yeah, you know, it was the same story. Like there was a stone that was blocking the kidney. The kidney was getting inflamed. It was going to erupt if I didn't take proper care. So potentially I could have lost my life if I didn't pay attention to the voice, to the signs, and to, you know, taking care of myself. But what I discovered after that was Louise's Heal Your Body. And she says the root of all problems when it comes to kidney is anger, and especially anger towards our partner. And I realized the issue was I was giving all of my love to somebody who couldn't meet me where I was. So all of that love was going towards a partner that couldn't really be there for myself. And in the process, I wasn't there for myself. So once again, we're coming back to healing those wounds that make us stay in relationships, in job opportunities that we see as our saving grace. But in reality, we're just wasting our potential and wasting our natural resources, our energy. And one question that comes to mind as I'm looking at these words is, do you ever feel the pressure now that you're aligned with your purpose, the pressure that you don't disappoint your higher self or your ancestors?
Like that I won't disappoint, that I might disappoint people and stuff?
Not people. No.
Or ancestors, yeah.
Yeah, rather your work, helping others, maybe, you know, righting the wrongs in society with the work that you're doing, bringing that awareness to problems and issues. Do you ever feel like, because sometimes I do, sometimes I feel that pressure that maybe I can do better, but maybe that's just, you know, one of those things that we can never overcome because we're not meant to be perfect. We are meant to have limits as humans. Even if our soul is limitless, our potential is limitless, we still have some limitations on the human plane.
Oh yeah, there's limitations, there's laws to the whole game, right? Dare we say rules. Capricorn. But like, that's the thing. So yes, pressure. Yes, I feel pressure 100%. And we all feel pressure. I don't think pressure will ever go away or should ever go away. It's just the correct amount of pressure type of thing, right? And like we talked about with this Capricornian archetype, which is ruled by Saturn, like that's what Saturn does. Like Saturn is a very cold, constricting pressure kind of planet. That's what it does. It's like a chiropractor for your soul, right? And Saturn basically rules all of your structural components. So your bones, your skeleton, your teeth, your fascia, your tendons, your ligaments, your joints, your muscles, the synovial fluid inside your joints, all of these things. So that is so like emblematic of Capricorn, right? The structure that holds society together. Like we need structure, right? We need responsibility, we need rules, or else it's just pure chaos. And even in chaos, in the dark of the yin, there is the order, right? And so even in the jungle, it's like perhaps one of the most chaotic places on earth. There's an order, there's a law that everything follows, sort of. So pressure, I think, especially if you're a sun, Capricorn sun, I don't know your rising and everything, right? Like you're gonna always feel that pressure of Saturn. But I think at some point it's like we learn to like dance with the pressure, and instead of following these harsh like limits and rules, I think rules and limits are like the training wheels. And then once you learn like proper self-governance and how to listen to your heart and like hear your body and like tend to these other parts of yourself, like you start to go into this like flow of rhythm. Rhythm is the word, right? So we're juxtaposing rules and rhythm, right? And rules is like the easier place to start, because say you need to build a new habit, it's like, okay, cool, like I can't do this anymore, like, you know, ultimatum, like it just can't be, right? And then I need to make sure I do this. It has to be like really regimented discipline to start building that sort of flow. But then again, we could say it's embodied or whatever, you know, spiritual word we like to use, but like at that point, eventually it just becomes like part of you, your muscle memory or something, right? And so that's like the beauty of like discipline, is that it leads to freedom. And you hear a lot of people say this, like discipline is freedom, like Jocko Willink out there, right? Or a lot of these like tough guy kind of like personas, like these Goggins type of people. And it is, but to make it like true freedom, it's like you're able to not, you don't have to follow it to such a militant degree, because then it's not freedom. It's like the devil card, like the Capricorn thing in tarot, right? And you have like a noose around the neck, but they could easily take that off. It's not even that tight, right? Like the guy and girl that are next to the devil there. So you will put pressure on yourself and keep yourself in a prison until you learn like the positive side of pressure and how it needs to have exhaust valves. And that's about rhythm and oscillation and flow, right? And so I think that like kind of off track from the initial question, but I think there's something really important in that. And I think the only way to cultivate that is by flowing, like literally experiencing both poles, and then the pendulum swings can become less and less for a period of time, and then you're in a more of a flow that feels more self-serving than sometimes these larger swings. So for example, I was way out in this bad health thing, this burnout, and so the counter action that I made was like really extreme. I like moved to the jungle and like, you see, and then, but over time, those curves start to like become less. And then I think it's a more sustainable flow. And with Capricorn, I love the bottle of wine analogy, because a lot of wines, they're really tight. You could describe them when they're young, the tannins and the structure, they call them really structured, right? And they even use that language. And then as it has enough time, And you can't rush that. There's no shortcut to that. It has to sit in time, you know? Then, wow, everything has softened, and interesting how this is all melding together, and it's a different personality. And and I think we see that with Saturn. And yeah, so we could dive into different parts. I'm, just kind of went off
Absolutely.
on a tangent.
I mean, pressure makes the diamond. There is a saying that, the journey to self-mastery is going to have some limitations. As long as you don't limit your own abilities, you're going to be fine under the pressure, because sometimes we get attached to certain expectations once again, and we break free from them, and then the chain is gone, that chain of those expectations. And something that you
Mm-hmm.
said kind of brought an image to mind, that we can dance with the rhythm, and that
Mm-hmm.
brings a little bit of excitement to the rules. But even if you picture the most beautiful dance, it follows a choreography, and that in
Mm-hmm.
itself is a series of rules. So if you can choreograph your way and think of yourself as the choreographer, there you go. Now you're co-creating with Saturn, if Saturn is your
Yeah.
relationship.
Yeah, and you can also improvise, right? I mean, there is choreography, but then there is also improvisation.
Yeah.
And, like, that's pure flow, right? And the tricky thing is, you're surfing, right? When you're in flow, you're surfing, and you're doing the zigzag between both sides of the brain and both sides of every polarity, but you're surfing between them so well that they're
Mhm.
essentially one, right? And that's what like a flow state is. And like what I'm like doing, like what many of us want to do, is to live your entire life in flow, right? That's like the goal, because it just feels effortless. It's the woo way thing and all of that. But it takes a lot of practice to get there. And I do think that the choreography and the scaffolding of structure is what equips you to then be able to reach flow. And it might be something you come back to, and even in your improvisation you'll bust out like dance moves that were part of previous choreographies, right? But now no longer are they being choreographed, they're just being deployed
Mhm.
based on your reaction to the music that's playing, right? And so it's like playing guitar, or you're not able to improvise at first. I mean, sure you can, but it's going to sound pretty janky, right? And so you need to learn certain riffs and certain songs and chords, and then eventually you have a toolkit where you can flow and improvise. But again, it's even a mix, because you did learn it from some form of scaffolding and structure. But I even still think there's like a pure improvisation. um, so I think it's the amount of like left brain thinking required in something is what makes you need more practice to be in a flow state with that thing. Whereas if it's something that's like you can pretty much just step out of that part of your brain and that part, and just literally, like, if I put on music right now and just start like moving your body and feeling it, you don't need practice for that. Like, you just need, but the practice could be your self-confidence, your
Mhm.
lack of judgment towards yourself. So there still is practice, I guess, right? To really flow. So maybe there always is a practice element before, right? But I do think creatively, the more complex left brain is involved, then it's like, because that pulls you out of flow, right? It's like when you're sitting in flow, communing with your higher self, and then you start like, oh yeah, wait, I need to write that down, and like, and then that reminds me, I need to, and wait, should the sentence have a comma there, or should I put a semicolon or a dash? Or you start like bringing yourself out of that flow space because you are like layering on too much complexity from the left side of the brain. So, but if you practice, like a virtuoso violinist who's playing like the hardest thing, then they can flow even in that. But it took more practice, because the actual like mechanics of the task on the left brain side were more difficult. You know what I mean? So,
Mhm.
um, like you could flow finger painting quicker than you're going to be able to flow like doing like Monet level stuff or whatever, right? So,
I agree, and I think you just made a comparison that I don't think you even realized, that you almost compared your life in the city as your left brain mastery, and then your life in the jungle as the right brain mastery. So you are bringing that into unity right now, which we all are in our different unique ways. And I agree, there is a certain degree of practice that needs to happen for that mastery of the left side of the brain, which will then help you to flow with more ease, even when you're just using the right side. Because it took me 10 years to put together a book that is based on research, that is based on thinking, that is based on experiments. The Capricorn and me just doing things and testing different approaches. Whereas it took me a week to channel a book. And that was only possible, not just because I'm working actively on my connection with my higher self, but because I also master the craft of writing. So when I had questions, is there a comma here or no, I would ask right away and listen and then apply the changes in real time, which is something that many writers are still in the process of discovering, that they can work with their higher self in that way. Scientists as well. And this is a very important step of the journey, which is receiving the vision that allowed you to make the seemingly huge jump to move to the jungle. But actually, you received the vision, and then it took you a while to process that vision before you made that big shift. So, what was that like? Did you have, first of all, doubts when you received the vision, or was there a clear inner knowing, yeah, that's the future? I just don't know when it's going to happen yet.
So certainty and doubt, I find, are like partners. They're complementary and they work together in that. Imagine an interconnected network, like of nodes. Pick any like sacred geometry, or the nodes are the points in your path where you reach certainty, where you reach clarity, right? But clarity and certainty are not lasting. They're ephemeral. They're not designed to last, because you don't stay in one node, right? That would be pretty boring, right? So eventually you lose certainty and you're filled with doubt once again. And that's what sends you on the next line that connects you to the next node that you'll reach. And in each node, you can choose different paths to go. But the motivational thing is that you no longer feel certain or whole where you are, right? You feel doubt. It's not so clear anymore. This doesn't fill me the same way that it used to. Like, what if I'm not meant to do this? Like, is this actually what I should be? It's like that doubt comes in, and that doubt is not a weakness. That doubt is not a lack of connection to your higher self or anything. That doubt is like part of the game. It's part of the design of how it works, right? And it would not be very fun without that. I mean, sure, do you want to just be like a one divine intelligence that's omnipotent, that's like God? Like, that sounds pretty boring, folks. Look, like, right? It's like, Buddhism, love it, useful, but where it leads to, I mean, kind of boring, right? So
sorry, I just want to interrupt you for a second, because I had the same thought a few days ago, and I thought, am I sounding crazy for saying that true enlightenment is boring? Because I thought I can embody my higher self right now and just stay at that frequency all day long. That's boring, because it's taken away from the pain, it's taken away from the bitterness, it's taken away from the ups and downs, and it's taken away from exploring every human state. So
you got to taste the rainbow. Skittles, that's the most brilliant thing. That's their contribution to the universe, right? And that is exactly what it is. Pure white light, it goes through a prism and it makes a rainbow, right? And that's distortion. Like, and distortion, as any guitarist knows, sounds beautiful, right? So that's the thing. And so you have to realize that, like, your goal is not to like reach this place of like clarity and knowingness, and sure, just like meditate under a Bodhi tree and like don't eat much and stuff like that. Like, doesn't sound so fun. So it's more fun to taste that and then just get enough to keep you on this interesting journey, right? And so I view like a vision is not a one-time thing. It's like it dripped. It's like an IV drip from your higher self, or it's like a puzzle that only one. I mean, and that's where we go wrong, is like we want to figure out our vision. We want to know our vision. And so I've done this tons in my path. You like try to force it. Like, so imagine you had a puzzle in front of you with, 99 million pieces, and they're all different colors, and you're like, okay, which one goes next? I need to find the next piece. Like, that's just such a brutal way to do the puzzle, right? Instead, you're like, okay, all the red ones, let's start by putting all the red ones together over there. All the border pieces that have a flat side, let's just like make the border, you know, oh, the green one's here. Oh, like this fits there. Like, and then it emerges in like clumps, right? And I think that's more actually the way it plays out with like your vision and your life's. And all of us want to find our one purpose in all of this. And that is like the cute question that we ask like little Stella when she's like 6, and then she tells us that she wants to be a vet, and then we're all like, oh, yay, like so cute. But then it becomes the question that keeps adults up at night, right? And that they suffer under, right? It's like, what am I here to do? What is my purpose? Well, you're not here to do one thing, folks. And if you're here to do one thing, it's to live, and then your purpose is to die. Like, that's the only like macro binary, like on and off purpose. The thing is, like, purpose is like a sine wave that oscillates, and you also have a mission, and mission and purpose are like feminine and masculine intertwining. And so you then imagine you have consciousness. So you're conscious of everything up here. You're not conscious of this. So you have a mission that's really conscious. You're like, I want to build the In Spirit Network, or I want to build Casa del Otorongo in the jungle. That seems like a cool mission. Let's follow that. And at first it's kind of murky. Then it gets clearer as you work on the vision. Then it's like at its peak of consciousness. And then eventually, like at some point, you're like, this vision or this mission, I don't really see it anymore. Right. And then your purpose is alternating. So as you finish that mission, the purpose comes as like an after echo that becomes conscious. So then you understand why you did that. Oh, I did that so that I could learn. I was in that business world in that company so I could learn the left brain skills to then serve me to be able to actually build something meaningful here in the jungle, in this like very spiritual part of my life. Oh, cool. But you can't, by definition, you can't know it previously. The whole part is that it's an emergent thing that happens in hindsight. Like, maybe I just decide to throw a banana off of the balcony right now. And like, I think I'm doing that because like, I just don't want it here. But maybe that banana is the actual food that like saves the life of like a particular bird that wasn't able to find food around, or you know what I mean? And like, I'll never even know that probably, but that was the purpose that I threw the banana, so we get way caught up here. And the reason I'm like putting a lot of life into this is I actually think it really like troubles a lot of people, like these types of dynamics. And when you learn to see it in a different way, it's just very freeing, and you don't feel so like you don't need to suffer as much. You can dance with the music a little more, and you can realize that you're not going to reach the one big vision. That doesn't really exist. You're going to get glimmers of an interesting vision that you feel certain about. And then later you're going to feel uncertain about it again. And that's the back and forth that keeps thrusting you through this journey of life. Right. So
It's a dance. Once again, I'm imagining a dance where sometimes you're leading and sometimes you have to trust that your partner is going to lead you forward. And your partner in this case is your higher self, because you're always dancing for that self-actualization dance with your higher self. As you were talking about the puzzle pieces, it almost, you gave a little bit of a strategy to people that are receiving these puzzle pieces, or the puzzle has just been dropped there, that life is a series of side quests, little quests that take you further and then further and then further. And then you put the puzzle pieces together from each of those quests in hindsight. Like, oh, okay, so that's why I had to do this. That's why it wasn't a waste of time, wasn't a waste of anything. I was just learning a different type of lesson, or I was learning through a different type of lens. But then another image came to mind, which is a blank piece of paper. And sometimes you would receive a huge drop of ink, which is part of the vision that your higher self is releasing. And now your higher self is like, this is your ink. You have the feather. Now use it to create something. So you're quite literally being given the fuel to work with at a metaphorical level, of course. But you make a great point. We have to trust the unknown. And it doesn't matter how much we awaken, ascend, reach that level of nirvana and self-mastery. There's always going to be a level of unpredictability, which is what makes the game or the experience so exciting. And it's about falling in love with being alive, which is the challenge.
Yes. Yeah, it's fear and excitement are two sides of the same leaf, you know? So you don't get one without the other, and it's all par for the course, you know? Yeah, I love that analogy of like a blank piece, and you get downloads of information, and you can practice that skill and you can receive many downloads. The thing is too, sometimes though, the timing, like you have to not force. That's the thing.
Mhm.
As soon as you start forcing, that's where you start creating suffering for yourself. And I don't just mean that in like the Buddhist way and all that. I guess it is, but it's like, you know, because some suffering is desirable and stuff in reality, right? It's like the weather and all of that. But like, as soon as you made, because for me, I receive visions, downloads. I can have a clear creative vision of like these things I want to create and that I will create, and I can see them to like a pretty clear degree. But the thing is, what I used to do is then I would be like, okay, that's it. That's the vision. So I need to make that vision a reality and make that happen now. But the thing is, the timing,
Mhm.
especially if you're really get to a place where you can really reach a very high frequency of information. Like maybe you were doing a plant dieta in the jungle and you're eating like just one specific kind of fish that's the most gentle fish from the river, and you're eating like a platano every day, like a banana, and no salt and no oil and nothing, and you get yourself into this like super open state, and that's what they do to commune with plants and to learn how to work with them. Like imagine you do something like that, or you go on a retreat, or you go to the mountain, whatever it works for you, and you receive this, like you reach information that's so profound and like it's just amazing. You reach that information, but sometimes the timeline of that information is like it's way different
Mhm.
than like tomorrow and this week. and
Mhm.
and so for a lot of these types that start learning these things, like we then start to like try to like implement the vision,
Yeah.
and it's not
Mhm.
the right timing. And sometimes we try to partner with people to make the vision because and then that those aren't the right timing for those relationships, those partnerships, those, and it can create a lot of like negative overhead. um, Whereas like I've done that a bunch because my Capricorn side's like, okay, cool, like let's make that happen. Like,
Success.
and like
I want it now.
Aries, yeah, I want it and let's go for it. And it just and that's the problem with constant ascension and all of this is like people don't realize, like they just want to raise their vibration and then they start to demonize lower vibration things. The thing is, if you stay in such a high frequency, you become very ineffective at implementing your vision because you didn't have enough time. Frequency is just like time, right? It's like the ups and downs are so fast
Mhm.
that you didn't have enough time to process at all the different layers to understand for the different parts of you, your body, your mind, your emotions, like they move at different speeds. The body is way slower compared to it's like the analog system compared to the like
Mhm.
digital. So you try to like take a shortcut and like skip the like time, and you can't do that. You can, but you won't really make anything, and you won't understand why you're making what you're making. You'll just be like channeling like these things, but they're not grounded in like an integrated understanding. Sorry, I keep touching the microphone. But they're not grounded in like an understanding that's integrated. And so you need to slow down. You need to get some mud on you again from life, like indulge, like bring your vibration down actually to go slow enough to honor the process of time, and then to actually be able to like, if you're someone also who wants to bring these things into form, but that's the kind of person I am. I want to reach the information and
Mhm.
then I want to make it into something useful for humanity, because that's just the practical way that I'm wired and what I enjoy, and I get a kick out of that because it's tricky, it's hard to do. And so it's like the life path 11 with the master number 22, like builder, right? And that I have both those numbers, right? And it's a very like tricky thing. Anyway, I caused myself a lot of like agony trying to move too fast and stay in a high vibration and stay in the imaginary state and not being in the implementation or the lower vibration state enough. And then I always demonized that state because I'm like, no, like my indulgent Taurus side that just wants to like go a little excessive and maybe smoke a bit more and eat that like cheeseburger and whatever, like my other side starts viewing that as like, oh no, that's like getting in the way of our like spiritual success or something. But that's actually not true. Like, you need to realize that they both need to get along. And yeah, so
It's a
that's
dance.
why like
Again.
it's a dance. And and it's about you want to bring the cosmos into the earth. And if you're someone who has like a really strong antenna and you're really open, actually grounding yourself further into the earth is what's going to strengthen the signal that you have, right? So
It's
yeah.
about bringing the spirituality down to earth. And you made a really
Mm-hmm.
good point about not rushing it for many reasons, but above all for the integration, which is why when you first embark on this hero's journey, on the awakening journey, or the healing journey, whatever label you put on it, you're going to be isolated a little bit because you need time to integrate. And especially if you've suffered a lot of trauma that you haven't even comprehended yet, you need that space and distance away from other people's kind of broadcasting towers so that you can understand your own signal. So
Mm-hmm.
taking that extra time, especially once you've received the vision as well, is not taking you away from your purpose. It's allowing you to process the best route to get there, or even for your body to recover. Because in the process of living and in the process of eating some of those cheeseburgers, we have damaged some of the body's abilities. So we need a little bit of rest for the body. So a lot of people
Mm-hmm.
go into this kind of sleeping stages as part of their hermit because their body's finally resting, because their body's preparing for the next phase where they're going to be super active, super social. They're going to be using their left brain a little bit more, or they're going to be out there in the jungle like yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So when you embarked physically on the journey, not potentially thinking about it, when you actually packed your bags and moved,
Mm-hmm.
what did that feel easier in some ways versus just thinking about it? Once you were on it, it was like, okay, that's it. This was always meant to happen. Because I think this is what stops a lot of people. They get trapped into the imaginary state where they're just
Mm-hmm.
thinking one day, one day, one day. But actually, once they take that first step, even if it's super unpredictable, they no longer think about that one day because that one day has already happened. And so it's easier to flow in the uncertainty.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So nature rewards courage, right? So it's like every step you take, you know, like that will reveal the next step, as Rumi said, as you walk on the way appears, that type of thing. But also like each step, you courage is like um, a self-feeding mechanism. As you take one courageous step, then you receive feedback that emboldens you and empowers you more. And it gives you just enough that the next step isn't necessarily easy. It's just possible,
Mhm.
basically. And you don't even want it to be easier because part of the meaning, I'm not saying, and we're not going to get so Capricornian where we say struggle is the only way to have meaning. And no, it's not. Like, that's completely false. You can be super comfortable and have incredible meaning from that too. But again, it's the oscillation between both, right? That's the real, where the real juice is at, right? But you just want enough courage that you make the next step, and that you had to also like deploy more courage, and you had to like put your heart into it in order to that. And so it's like each step begets the next. Easy, like easier than you thought. Yes, it's going to be easier than you probably thought sometimes, and then sometimes it's going to be harder than you ever thought. But if you knew it was going to be that hard, you wouldn't have done it. So then there's also like, you don't even want to know that. You just, so that's where it depends on the magnitude of what you're trying to do. But for me, like I used a forcing function, which is that I put a large part of my life savings into like actually purchasing materially a place. And so like I knew like there's going to be so many times that I'm going to want to give up on this, right? And I'm not going to give up though, because like this is from my heart and that's not part of who I am. But at the same time, if you like have these forcing functions, they're kind of like a way of hacking like your level of like commitment when you know that it will be tested after, sort of. It's like the whole burning the boats behind you type of metaphor and all that. But yeah, I think that you think it's going to be so hard and stuff. It's not, because you're going to just be in this like communication with the universe again, and it's going to keep rewarding you based on your courage. So that will always work itself out. And yeah, and like there's a classic like Terence McKenna quote that I love where he says like something like the ultimate, like that's the shamanic dance, is like hurling yourself over the waterfall into the abyss and then just realizing that it's a feather bed at the bottom that you end up just landing on, right? And so yeah, I'd say like be bold, be courageous. That's more my message to people.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
we've been conditioned to believe that we need to have a 50-year plan in order for us to have a sense of safety, when in reality, we don't know what's going to happen. Especially, I think the pandemic reminded us how short life is, because it affected everyone. Suddenly we had that oneness, that unity consciousness, and it happened during a global crisis. So sometimes we need a reminder through that crisis. And we just need to know what the next step is. We don't need to have the whole journey mapped out ahead. We just need the first step. And when it asks of us to be courageous, then we start to believe that about ourselves. So that self-fulfilling prophecy, like you mentioned, it just becomes the norm. I am courageous. You're affirming something positive about yourself, and you're not hacking it, your mindset, because you're actually following through with actions.
Evidence. Yeah.
There is a transformation here that happens from the wounded warrior who thinks everything has to be so difficult, I'm going to be the tortured poet, to actually becoming the hero that's like, I'm not going to allow the victim mindset or the victim storylines to trap me once again. I'm going to see them. I'm going to acknowledge these are all storylines that I can adopt right now and use them. Or I can just say, this is who I am. I'm showing up today. I don't know what else is going to show up on my path, but I'm open. I'm ready to receive whatever it is, and whoever it is that wants to learn with me, grow with me, because we're learning and growing with the animals and the plants, not just the humans, side by side. Which then takes me to kind of the next big pivotal moment on our journey, which is where we finally get the courage to share the wisdom that we've received, and to maybe take some bold steps out of our comfort zone, where we start to talk about things that our friends and family didn't know that we were capable of talking about, or maybe they did. They were just waiting for us to get that courage. And I'm curious to hear, what is it that you feel called to dedicate the next year, 5 years? Where has your higher self been taking you the most when it comes to kind of like the impact through your own voice that you're going to leave behind?
So a big overarching theme is the courage thing we just spoke about, and the courage to share your most like tender parts with the world, because that's what, as mammals, we are afraid to do for a reason, because that's how we survive. We survive in groups, and it's just a mammal thing. Like plants don't have this problem. We'll talk about that in a second. But mammals live in groups, and because we live in groups, if one member of the group shows what we perceive to be a weakness, then it's our duty to the rest of the group to act aggressive towards this person, because we need to protect our children, frankly. And so like it just comes down to that level, right? It's like so when someone shows their vulnerable part or shows a weakness, then we're like, okay, that's sketchy. Like now we're all in danger, right? So that's why. So also use that to like forgive the people that are casting shame and judgment on you, because they're just doing what they know how to do to survive. That's just the way it works. Whereas if we look at the plant kingdom, their strategy, I get chills. Like all these plants, what they do is they actually show their most vulnerable parts, their reproductive organs, the flowers, and they open it fully, right? I could come and just rip it off and bite the plant and, ow, 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 that would suck, right? So they're literally putting themselves out there. And then that's the way they attract all of the pollinators and all of the humans and the animals that eat the fruits. And the point of the fruit is just to nourish the seed that's inside. The seed is the real point. That's like a whole other kind of like wisdom teaching. But basically, that's what I want to create, like a plant. Plants are prolific creators. They're creating and they're displaying their creations, and they're like receiving through their leaves light, and they're giving medicine through their leaves. So the leaves are the giving and receiving parts. So I want to inspire people to have enough courage to not create like a mammal, but to create like a plant, basically, and to show you how you can work with plants to create more prolifically, and to do all the inner work that's preventing you from being able to do that now. So I really do see myself as in that bridge way of like, you know, communing directly with the plants, listening to them. I enjoy that. That's fun for me. So that's also honoring my own like art and just like my heart, and then turning that into words, which I love, and then using those words to then inspire people to kind of less apologetically embrace their full heart and what it says, and to live more based on that language, and to have it go from a whisper to just being this like undeniable presence that is the way that they navigate their whole life, right? Because I think fear kills more than death, and so that's a way of helping. And I finally just like figured out how to like do it in the way that makes me also the most happy, which is kind of what I described, right? And so I like talking to all plants, but I really, really love, and I have a deep friendship and like student teacher relationship with cannabis and with Camellia sinensis, the leaf and the herb, or the leaf and the bud. And I really feel called right now to just like deepen, and keep deepening that practice, and keep creating, co-creating kind of hand in hand with nature. Yeah, that's pretty much it. And then also like increasingly like building the scaffolding so that other people who want to sort of have a life like this, they're able to get there in a slightly less gnarly way, basically.
Mm-hmm.
They're still going to have their own path and stuff, but like eventually the sort of online communities, I see those being real like places in physical reality, like little towns essentially, that can help facilitate this like next generation of like this new world, this new consciousness, with like an entrepreneurial tinge to it, so that it's actually grounded in reality and actually works. So that's the sort of thing.
I can see that as well. I can see the communities turning into little hubs with working bees, where we're the bees, but we're not
Mhm.
contributing to the consumerist agenda. We're contributing to preserving the natural resources and educating people and spreading the awareness around how to be more connected with everything that is alive, and not just people. But I love that you're using the model of the plants, because I'm just thinking, imagine how many artists have been inspired by the plants over
Oh,
many
yeah.
centuries. How much art is all around us because plants inspire us with their vulnerability in that way. And on some intuitive level, we use that perhaps to fuel our own courage to be more authentic and more vulnerable. Yes, we do have
Yeah.
animals as well, but yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, whether we choose to or not, like in Quechua they call plants nyawi, and that means like those who take care of us. That's how they call a plant, right? So what does that tell you? A lot, right? And so yeah, it's an intertwined relationship, since there was like cyanobacteria, like at the ocean floor, right? The first photosynthesizing organisms that eventually turned into like plankton and algae, and then clung to rocks, and then received more sunlight, and we're like, hey, why don't we stay on the rocks and put down some things that look like roots, and then grew into like all the plants that we have. And then there was enough energy for other organisms to eat, and then to grow bigger, and so all the complexity comes from like, so yeah, it's whether we like it or not, we're in that co-creation, and nature is, we are nature. Like we're speaking to ourselves when we speak to nature, and it's a lot of fun, and it's not some kind of far out mystical concept. It's just a lot of us, we're living life so loud and so overstimulated that we can't really hear that many things anymore. So some of us like basketball, we're like a bit taller, and like it's kind of easier for us to like put the ball in the hoop, and stuff like that. But it's something every single person can learn and do. So that's also increasingly, I want to help people to learn how to like directly communicate with nature and like channel its messages and stuff. Like, how do you have a conversation with a river? Well, there's a way to do it, and it takes practice, but you can do it too. So yeah.
Absolutely. It's the language of the intuition. The more we
Yep.
connect to our own intuition, the more we connect to every single living being on earth right now. And the final step of our jungle journey together is the community building, which is where I think you are currently residing, where you're harnessing the power of bringing people closer to themselves, but also to nature, and
Mhm.
co-creating something that has a ripple effect in society, energetically speaking as well. Even if people are based in different parts of the world, by communicating with you, you are like the spokesperson for the jungle at the moment. So what is your vision for the next year, and what types of collaborations you would like to accomplish? What types of people would you like to invite to join you?
Okay. So being like sort of at the tactical layer, in April, we're going to have a retreat here in the jungle. So if you're someone that's like, you identify with like whatever we've talked about here, but also like you really want to like create from your heart, you want to go about this in a conscious way, but you want to kind of integrate the two worlds, like walk this middle way path, then, that'd be the kind of person. So we're going to have a retreat in April here in the jungle that's going to be a mix of nature immersion, but also like interacting with the people here. So while we talk about community, that's actually something important. Is when I came to the jungle, I knew I would love the plants. I knew I would love the animals, the nature, everything. I've always loved that. But it was the people here that actually like broke my heart open, sort of. Like I've had moments where I'm like sitting at like a lunch table and then this girl's singing and I just start crying at the table in front of like all these people. And you know, living in a small community like this, like where there's like X thousand people, like under 10,000, it's really like a medicine, and it's been a medicine for me, and it's been maybe one of the more powerful medicines, actually. Um, so yeah, I want to share that with more people who come here. So we'll be like interacting with the people in the village, getting to know them, going to the school, like helping the kids, like, doing what we can to help support the place too. So that's one way. You can find that on LinkedIn, or you can go to nomadretreats.com and you'll find it there. If you feel called to work with ayahuasca or the medicine, right? We do that here too. So we have a site, casadelotorongo.com, and that's all about the medicine work. We work with local maestro ayahuasqueros. They're in their 80s, right? So they've been doing this for like over 60 years. And then I've been trained and initiated in the Quero lineage, which is a lineage from the Andes, the high Andes. So we kind of fuse together like the jungle ayahuasca space with the Andean medicine wheel and energetic medicine, basically, that the Quero have discovered and preserved for us. So that's that. And then online, we do community stuff in Spirit, which is skool.com/inspirit. And then I'm building a cannabis one too, which is called Conscious Cannabis. It's skool.com, school.com/cannabis. And those are both communities. And in the cannabis one, you're learning to connect with the deep spiritual side of cannabis and to have a, healthy reciprocal relationship. And then in Spirit, it's more about connecting everyone in this network and just trying to create value for everyone, basically, who's like a spiritual person who's also into business. So who's trying to like reconcile the two and integrate the two, right? So that's kind of what's going on for community stuff. But I really feel communities like the medicine, and even more than community, it's like network. Like I see it's like networks of communities. I see that being like the future state of humanity, and almost returning to like a neo-tribal thing. And like we say tribalism is bad. We're like, oh, we like grew out of tribalism. That was like savage and like fighting each other. Whereas I see, sure, we did, and then we learned all these things. And then on this side of the pendulum, we've now reached a tipping point where we've learned the good things to learn. And now we're, in the like shadow of scale, like cities. And, it's like, it's too big, and then people feel called to like be in a smaller community again. But it's like what you said about COVID. Like we had a unity consciousness, but we also had a more separated existence than ever, right? Everyone was stuck and forced to sit down in their home and just reflect, right?
Mhm.
So like it was this like disconnected unity consciousness that we now have networks, Aquarian age technology, internet, these things to connect those in a network. So it's like this decentralized network of communities. And that's what I see as like the future state of humanity. And that's how the forest works. And that's how nature works. It's more like that, right? It's not like they're like one boss tree in the forest who's the main boss of all everything. It's like there's many big ones in each community, and they're not all the same size. There's not equality across the board and stuff. It's Pareto distribution, but it's a network, right? And I think that's what's going to happen. There's going to be so many communities like In Spirit that are started, and then it's like the next layer that I'm actually trying to build. That's why I don't call In Spirit a community. It's a network, because it's a network of networks. And that's the whole idea, right? There's other ones that have popped up, right? And they're all going to be working together and helping each other. It's like the mycelium underneath the forest floor, right? So thanks for sticking with me in all the different metaphors. And I like to have fun with it all. So I'm indulging myself as we talk here.
I
So.
absolutely love it, because that's the thing. Like, you bring a metaphor that's just come to you as like an intuitive message, but it unlocks something in me. So I'm listening to you, like my imagination is active and I'm receiving my own downloads. But we are returning to living with an open heart. And I think while you were talking and speaking about how you found this connection with people that you didn't anticipate, because maybe you weren't looking for it, or you didn't know that you need it. I think many of us have felt this disconnect from peers, and we are desperately seeking from connections where we can have our heart chakra open and feel that love and receive that love at the heart of who we are, not just for the packaging that we came into, because this is largely what we've been conditioned to look at. Even if you think about the dating apps and the way that modern people are finding their partners,
Mm-hmm.
even the employment process of CV applying and kind of looking at the, what's the package, like where did you work before that? Like, they don't look at the soul of who you are. They don't look at even the instructions that you have, human design, astrology. All of that can help us work in such more meaningful ways, which is the future. But we're gonna get there. We're gonna get there. And your example was a jungle entrepreneur. I think is setting the tone for a very interesting future of entrepreneurship. So how would you advertise being a jungle entrepreneur to people that are considering leaving behind the traditional office space because it's suffocating their soul, but they do want to contribute to innovation in society? It's just that now they're realizing they can do it from the jungle, or they can do it from a place where they're more connected with nature, with plants, and even with other communities, other people that might not necessarily be their colleagues, but collaborators from the community.
Yep. So I would say that it's a very wise thing to do to relocate yourself to an area that is more wild and natural, where you pretty much live outside at all times. Like I can't go inside here. There's no inside, right? I don't live inside, right? I live inside my heart, but not, so actually that I just have to say that right now because that's so fun. So I can't take credit for this one. It's from the late great Don Howard Lawler, who is an amazing maestro ayahuasquero and huachumero, and he came from the States. He came down here to Peru. It was one of the earliest like gringos to do that. So he says, my head is my office and my heart is my home. I only go to the office when I have to. Otherwise, I prefer to work from home, right? And that wasn't during the work from home era. So now it's even more like hitting. So I like to share that one with people. But like back to what I was saying. So it's a great idea to relocate yourself closer to nature. It's a natural rebalancing from the Vata digital Aquarian craziness that is the internet and working online. And the path to freedom for a lot of these conscious entrepreneurs, conscious leaders, soulful entrepreneur, jungle entrepreneur, whatever, is like you need the internet to access, you know, the rest of your soul tribe and all these things, and to meet the right people and to get demand and to build audience and to build community and whatever you want to do. It's the great distribution system. However, it also tends to wreak havoc on our nervous systems, which are not adapted to that. So living somewhere like this, when you interact with the computer and stuff, like it doesn't hurt you as much because you're just being like completely like, I'll just go in the river and just like, you know, close my crown chakra and just clean myself like right after this. Right. So that I think is a medicine for counterbalancing the dis-ease of technology and the path that you'll probably work on as just a person who lives today. Now, I would not necessarily recommend doing that in the Amazon jungle unless you feel really called for something in the jungle or by the medicines here, or there's something that's just an obsession level, like your heart is just in love with it, because it's a hard place. It's an extreme place on earth, right? The jungle is very uncomfortable and difficult. It's like Saturn, right? We know this as Capricorns. That creates something beautiful. That breaks me open in many ways. I'm crying like a baby, you know, at times because I'm forced to meet some suffering inside or some discomfort, which makes me have a realization about how I'm the one inflicting that on myself. But it's like there's no hiding from it here. You know what I mean? So like when I started putting my story online, I got a lot of people, they're like, oh my God, like I want to move to the jungle too. And like, come, like I'll host you here. I'm not saying I don't want people to like do what I'm doing. Come and do it, please. I would love to inspire you to do that if that's what you feel like you want to do. But to be honest, like as much as I love nature, there's times when I'm like tested based on the jungle environment, right? And it's not the easy place. So there's many places on the earth that are a little less hardcore, that would probably lead to more wellness for most people. And then you can visit the jungle and get that dose of it when you need it. And if you really love jungle and you just want it a bit more comfortable, just pick a little higher altitude. Like that's why people love like Costa Rica or like the Selva Alta, like places in Peru. That's because it's an easier climate, fresher breeze. You get some mountains, some rocks, you know, things like that. Whereas here, this is the low, thick, like hardcore jungle. And
Have we lost you, Jake? I think we lost Jake in the jungle. Hopefully Jake manages to come back online to finish our conversation. If not, we'll capture the rest of the episode later on. Jake
Sorry.
is back. We didn't lose him to Congo.
Mic drop moment, and then off into the river I go. Or my Starlink is set on the village power grid right now, and we're just setting up our solar, so it shuts off at 12, and then I had to switch to my phone. So that's what happened, guys.
It's okay. You were very passionately explaining something, and we interrupted that state of the flow,
Yeah,
which is the shame.
that's okay. But where did we stop, Stella? Because my message was just live in nature, live in the wilderness. That's very healing and balancing to you because of the work you're going to do with computers and with technology and internet. But then equally, don't necessarily pick the Amazon jungle unless something really calls to you that you love it so much, and or you really want to learn the medicine, or you feel super called to something here. Absolutely follow that if that's what you feel, 100%. But it's a pretty hardcore, uncomfortable place that will, be probably too much for most people. Yeah,
I feel
there's
like
a reason there's not that many people who live here.
it's the journey of the shaman. The shaman goes into the nature to challenge himself or herself, but traditionally himself, because that is quite literally captured through stories on screen as well, where when the male is ready to become a man, he goes into the wilderness, which is the shaman's path of our ancestors, of course. Nowadays, I think the governments have they've changed the narrative, sending boys to the army to fight against invisible enemies, because we still live in a state of division and building borders to separate ourselves based on false values. But that's a conversation for a whole different episode. I suppose even in the jungle, we still have different species trying to almost attack each other, because we have a higher level of consciousness, supposedly, that should help us to rise above those primitive, um, I don't know, not necessarily desires, but
Yeah.
that different programming that's into us.
Yeah, well, so I don't see it like we rise above it. I see it like we have to reconcile and come to terms with those parts of ourselves. They're parts of ourselves. Like, there's a part of you that's violent. Like, that's part of you. There's a part of you that, like, created a Holocaust. That's a part of you. There's a part of you that's so greedy and exploitative about your selfish needs. That's part of you. Like, you have to accept them and see them with love also. And that's hard, but that's the work. And the jungle shows you that. The jungle, I mean, shamans here, people think that they're just all about healing. They fight each other, right? So they literally attack each other and stuff. And that's not healing. That's like brujeria. That's what we call sorcery here. But the line between those two is so fine, right? So you're working in pura medicina if you're healing, cleaning, protecting, right? Or connecting to the divine. But protecting, that's a tricky one. So someone comes up to you and your family and they want to cause them harm. So then you're protect. But then how far do you take it? Do you completely obliterate them? Do you just take away their shamanic powers, their icaros, so that, you took away the rifle from the bad guy, right? But so the line is so thin, and all of them have to like go outside the line to learn the line and stuff, pura medicina, right? So, and part of like evolving as a human and enjoying your existence as a human and enjoying three-dimensional reality, which all these spiritual people seem to not want. They want to go into 5D or something like this. That is not like you need to accept all of these parts of humanity, these savage, primal parts. And the jungle teaches you that, right? Like, am I going to be mad at the jaguar that just savagely broke the neck of the caiman and ate it? And you know what I mean? No, I'm not. I'm not mad at all at that jaguar, right? So like, I'm that gentle of a soul that I'd be like considering when I first got here of like mosquitoes and stuff. I mean, it wasn't my first time around mosquitoes, but like I was in that state of like, I don't want to like hurt them. Like, oh my God, like, like I just want to know, like because don't angrily kill the mosquito, but like with the fierceness of self-protection, if you don't, you're actually you're allowing self-harm, right?
Sacrificing yourself.
And that's not and as soon as you do that a little bit, it's just a floodgate that gets opened, right? Where you're somewhat willing to accept self-harm now, right? That's not self-love. That's not taking care of yourself. So like, if someone came here to hurt my dogs or family or like for sure. Like there's a warrior in you that needs to be ready. And that's what they know here in the jungle. They're hardcore like that. Like people here, they're really friendly and stuff, but they're also like they're just direct and stuff. They're indirect in some ways too, because they have this saving face thing. I think it's come into Peruvian culture via Chinese culture and stuff like that. I'm not sure, because there's a lot of Chinese influence here. And that's not a critique of by any means. That's just there's a saving face side that's indirect that I've noticed in Peruvian people. But there's also, and that's a generalization, obviously. But then there's also this part that's just super direct. So, for example, someone might go to someone's house here and they'll be like, "Hay huevos?" Like, "Are there eggs?" And the person will be like, "Sí, hay." Like, "Yes, there are." They'll be like, "Dime un sol de huevos." Give me one sol of eggs. Then the person will go get the eggs. They'll give them the money. They'll say nothing else to each other. The person leaves, right? Or if you want to take a picture with someone here, they probably won't even smile in the picture. They just be like, and you're like, "Oh, like cheese, like smile." Like they're not mean. They're not happy. They're just so real that like, they're not even going to smile. They're not even, why does that make sense? So, but you can learn a lot from like observing the jungle shows you, you have to accept your shadow. You have to accept that part of the jungle, and everything's trying to eat you and kill you. And you like, there is that. And there's also the beauty of the jungle will protect you. The river will protect you. The spirit of the river, the spirit of the forest. But you need to be in relationship with those things, and you need to be like in reciprocal flow. That's Aini in the Quechua, right? It's like you need to be in that flow. And when you find that flow, you stop fighting with the place and you start like surfing with the place. But I really think a big message is like the jungle shows you like it's not all like butterflies and hammock naps and like swimming in the river, and like, and spirituality is not that either. It's like accepting the deepest, darkest parts of yourself. And that's what Saturn does. So the rings of Saturn are fragmented pieces of rock that are just, right? They're all fragmented and broken. And Saturn, through order, through love, it and through its force, its constricting gravitational magnetism, polarity, however, it pulls it into this. And when you see it from space, it just looks like unity. It looks like a beautiful ring. And that is every fragmented part of yourself being brought into unity through love, right? And that's what the work is when it comes to spirituality and enjoying your existence as a human. It's getting to know all the fragmented parts of yourself and uniting it through love, basically, right? And extreme parts like here, they can show you more extreme parts of the shadow. So I think it's like you got to reconcile and accept those parts of yourself, and then you can look through you don't have a monster inside you. You look through the eyes of the monster. You are the monster, and the monster is your friend. And the monster doesn't come out and just fight to be seen. You have a partnership, and you work as allies, and you deploy that energy when it's something that, you know, is useful at, you know, with the matters at hand, right? And with human beings in our shadow, based on our course of history, we have a tremendous amount of violence, and we have sex. We've put sex in there into our shadow, pretty big, right? Pretty deep. Religion, these things. So there's a lot of like, you have this huge like work to do around like loving the angry parts, the hostile parts of you, and accepting the breadth of your sexuality and desires and the animal side. It's like we're this like soulful thing like put to this animal thing, and then the two have to get along, and that's the hard human experience, right? And they always feel like they're at odds. They're not. They're just extremes like meeting each other, as all extremes meet, right? So,
It's a dance between the light and the dark. It's a dance. It's the balance. It's the way of the balance. I think we're going through all of this healing, through this awakening, so that we can bring the balance, and that is the future. Because standing just in the darkness, even if you're protecting people within that darkness and trying to be some sort of gatekeeper to not allow more violence to come out is not doing anyone a service, because you're just defending the order of the violence in some ways. But going into the light and just saying love and light, that's it, that's the only way we're going to save everyone and everything, that's just denying a whole part of being human and the human experience. So the path of balance, it will have you wounded and bruised. It will also have you inspired and infused with that higher purpose. But it takes a while to get there, because you're going to go through the extremes a little bit yourself. And you make a really good point. The jungle is not for beginners. A little bit like when you see people that have pets, you're like, I want to get a dog, but you don't know anything about raising a dog and taking care of another life. So maybe wait before you go into the jungle, but you don't have to go to the jungle to embody more of a soulful entrepreneurship lifestyle, or even shamanic lifestyle, because the resources are available to all of us, and you can start connecting with nature, with yourself, even from your living room within a big city. It's the intention, it's the desire to grow, it's the desire to connect more with your higher self, and the way she'll be, revealed to you. Because that's how I found my way back to myself, because I was so disconnected from my higher self. I knew this isn't okay. Like, I'm standing alone in a empty space, myself is missing. And I asked the universe, guide me back home, guide me back to myself, because I knew there is no one on earth right now that I can go to and ask. There is no book that I can pick up, no movie. It was inner work that I needed to do, and only I could have done the steps. I just needed to make space to listen and connect with that intuition. And it sounds like you've done the same thing. So thank you for taking us on this jungle journey with you in the last hour or so. I have a little bit to share with you around your life path and earth instructions to follow the rhythm of where to do it. So you mentioned 11 and 22 as part of your numbers, but I'm bringing different numbers here using the destiny path numbers. So every letter equals a number, and your first letter equals number 1, which is life path 1. So the path of leadership, here to pave a new path with your innovative and entrepreneurial ideas. And once again, you can interpret leadership in any way that you would like, because we have all kinds of leadership available: transformational, authentic, disruptive, you name it. So, but the fact of the matter remains is that you're here to lead, and that desire to create something new or to transform the status quo will be there with you. Middle path 7, partnerships. So something that you've already mastered, something that you're really good at, being around people. Now you're here to kind of pass that forward to others and help them get better at forming their own partnerships. So the way that I've put it is collaborate and co-create with others as you help them find their soul tribe. So kind of being like a matchmaker for people, finding their community, finding their belonging to the world. And finally, your last name equals 8, which is the path of transformation. So be a change catalyst and use your voice to be a force of transformation, because that transformation is already in your name, and you bring that with your communication wherever you go. And that's something that, again, is not going to go away unless you change your name, which is going to be you changing the instructions. So overall life path 7, putting everything together and bringing it to 1 digit. The path of community, the path of working with people and doing things together. So moving really closely in alignment with that unity consciousness and using that spiritual knowledge to build perhaps the communities of the future. You're nodding. It resonates with your spirit.
No, it resonates deeply. Yeah, totally. Beautiful, Stella. 100%. I'm curious. So if I did Jungle Jake, it would just be 1-1.
It will be 1-1, and it will be the path of resources. Yeah, overall life path, resources.
Like 11, or would it stay as 1-1? 2 leaderships.
I would bring it to a single digit always, because that's just something that
2.
feels intuitively.
So we'll go to 2.
So it would go to 2, which is resources.
Cool.
And resources could also be not necessarily things that people buy, but things that people can engage with, something in the physical world. So like you're building a retreat right now. This is a physical resource that you're creating where people can engage with it. Two is also the life path of kind of values and the duality. We keep mentioning the
Right.
duality between left and right, masculine and feminine, shadow and
Hmm.
light. So the path of balance. But as of now, as of currently, it's the path of community. And it's true that some people have changed their names, which is a more artistic name, and that changes their instructions, which is a really interesting and unique way to work with the so-called matrix, because you can change your coordinates again with the guidance from your higher self. But everything
So
that we do is for a reason.
I love it because like part of me wanted to be like Prince and just like go that deep where I'm like, I just like my name's Jungle, like that's it. And then but it's cool what Prince did, how he chose nothingness, like, and just put a symbol instead of even an actual any letters, right? I'm curious like what that
Mhm.
probably did to his at that stage of his transformation. But it makes sense. And Jungle Jake is like the brand, right, in the world. So it is the thing that gets resources in the material way in some way, because it's the way to fit it into the mechanism of creating symbology and branding and just the
Mhm.
ways that we do, right, as like your hieroglyphs or whatever. That's super cool. I love that. Thanks so much for doing this for me, Stella.
Absolutely. But that's just part one. There's a little bit more. And this is
Cool.
probably the part that get you a little bit more excited because it has more to do with the astrology and the actual signs and the 12 houses and kind of borrowing the energies. So with your sun sign in Taurus, very action driven higher self, in house 3, which is communication, which is working with a conscious mind. So the biggest way to demonstrate the difference, the way that I'm interpreting it, is your comfort zone is spirituality. Your comfort zone is going super deep into the mystery of life, whether it's through your own research, whether it's going on traveling adventures for yourself or with other people, or literally having conversations with people, which are all actions that you're taking. But your sun sign, which is your higher self and how you're here to channel more of your potential, is all about bringing that to the level of the conscious mind so that you are the teacher and the leader and the guide that actually makes it easier for other people to understand the mysteries of life. A lot of people spend their life in the moon sign. Mine is Gemini in spirituality, the 12th house. So I was very comfortable just talking about ideas for a very long time and just reading my books and being super passionate about passing those books to everyone until I realized, oh, my sun sign is Capricorn and it's Capricorn in the 8th house. So I need to be transforming with my actions. And so I separated myself from that moon sign in order for me to truly embody that higher self. With your south node, existing knowledge, this is where the sensitivity comes into the picture. And it's that emotional intelligence that has allowed you to ascend to the level of embodying fully the Capricorn in the 12th house. So now you can teach people how to do the same, how to open their hearts and meet their higher self and meet themselves at the level of their higher self, even if their instructions are not to become ascended masters, but rather to understand how to live their life with more meaning. And then your North Node with Capricorn, the 12th house, it's really you spend the first part of your life getting to do the journey yourself. So now you can teach people how to do it because you now have the identity, which is the moon sign, and your North Node is you passing it forward as part of the kind of mission, the soul purpose, as I like to call it. Rising sign Capricorn. So actions speak louder than words. This is the best way to describe a rising sign that's Capricorn because it really is about the actions. If you get lost in the thoughts, the thought process, you kind of lose a little bit of the momentum and the connection with others. And then Venus sign with Aries. This is the second house appearing again. So the resources, the balance, but there's the spiritual link here. So your love language is the people that you're collaborating with, the connections that you are kind of co-creating with. And what is coming up here is your soul tribe. So you're meant to be co-creating this change with your soul tribe, which might have taken you a little bit longer to get to this point and kind of being away from your soul tribe in order for you to complete your moon sign south node integration. which is quite beautiful. That's the way the universe works. And the overall overview here with all the numbers is with the path of leadership. You're meant to be here as a tribe leader. There is that word again, tribe. Be the spokesperson for people who seek higher meaning and purpose and pave the way for unity consciousness with this huge community theme. With the middle path, you're here to be the awakening guide. And that could be interpreted to awaken people to communication with the plants, with the animals, or even with their higher self. But using your emotional intelligence to guide people towards self-actualization and facilitating those collaborative experiences, because you're not meant to do it all on your own. You're just meant to create the spaces where people can inspire each other, awaken each other, which is where the function of delegation a little bit comes into the picture. And finally, with path 8, which is kind of your communication style into the world, I've used the words ascension torch bearer, but there is the word nature that wants to come in here as well. But I'll stick with this one for the time being. Create resources to uplift humanity and guide them back to the light by holding space for them in the dark, which is where maybe this darkness is symbolic. Maybe it's just in the space of conversations, and maybe it's in the physical space of the jungle, as you have built a very beautiful and kind of magical retreat for people where they can meet their light, their higher self, their purpose, but also their shadow self, and kind of confront the fears so that they can no longer be ruled by them. But yeah, this is
Beautiful.
it.
Amazing, Stella. Incredible. I love that. That's so valuable and helpful. Thank you so much. And it's funny, the last thing you said about in the dark, like a lot of ceremony, most ceremony is in the dark, right? That you do with plants and things like that. So it's also kind of underlines that for me, but very cool. I love it. I like how you work with astrology. I hadn't seen also numerology, like the 3 initials, nor having like the sun, north node, moon, south, like the way you've assigned them to each of those like pathways, I guess, or stages, or I'm not sure how you view it, but that's so cool. So thank you.
My pleasure. It's kind of like streams. It's
Streams.
streams of flow. Yeah. So the first stream of flow is who you're becoming in your learning path. When you complete that, you've completed your purpose, you've completed all the integration that your soul volunteered to experience as part of the current avatar that you're working through. And then the middle path is what you've already completed that identity integration and assignment. So this is the point where you can help others, a little bit like where your coaching opportunities, your mentorship opportunities based on your innate abilities, not what your qualifications are. And then the final path is how you're going to communicate and relate to people, which I think it's really important for people that are still working in offices. But as we're moving into the future of community, when people know that they have aid, for example, this is a disruptor. So when you know that you're going to trigger people because you have that disruptive energy by default, you know how to work with your own energy to play with the flow in a way that it you know when to tone down and to ebb and flow the right way so that you can connect with as many people as possible, which I think for some of us this has been a bit of not necessarily an obstacle in life, but I have personally triggered a lot of people and I haven't always known when to pull back. But we're learning. The more we learn about ourselves, the better we become at this.
Yeah,
And as
I love that. Oh, tell me.
as I like to say, one is not born to their purpose, one steps into their purpose. And really, it's the actions. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a Capricorn, but because my whole life has transformed the more I've changed my course of action and the more I've listened to the inner guidance, the more I've used the tools available. And I think you're doing something similar by creating a type of sanctuary for people where you can help them work better with the information that's available in the external world, but also with the information that's available to them when they look within. So give us an invitation, an open invitation that hopefully is going to extend through the universe, or rather, it's going to be magnified through the power of the universal laws and hopefully reaches the right people.
Yeah, so come on down to Casa del Otorongo, right? We will dance in the dark. No, but seriously, the Otorongo. So the Otorongo, jaguar, it's a Quechua word, and it oversees the west direction, so in the cardinal direction. And it's about the mental, emotional layer, right? And it's about having the courage to see in the dark parts inside you, to look in your shadow, and then to, devour the fear, but to basically turn that into love, like to see it with loving eyes. So you have to have the courage to look at the dark parts inside you and learn to see them with loving eyes. And by doing that, that's the alchemy, that's the healing in the moment. And even when you're doing medicine work and you might be purging, like there's no shortcut. Like the purging is kind of a shortcut. It gets it out of you quick, something that wasn't coming out of you. But you need to experience the qualitative information that was surrounding that stuck energy in you, or that part that you deemed unworthy of love in your shadow. So that's why, like, you can't just purge something out without like going through the actual understanding of it, and that's why the two go hand in hand. And that's why, like, the way these plants work, cannabis or ayahuasca, it's like illuminating things in your shadow, running energy through your system to help you to bring that, to be able to release it. You want to with cannabis, is not really your choice, ayahuasca, and you have to have the courage to look, be afraid to do it anyway. That love, it's like you don't cut is sick, you don't just cut the roots. You have to go soil that's around the root, heal it, right? So come on down to the jungle and we'll do that type of stuff together. But I see why, like, all of this has happened in terms of like the name of this place, the path that I'm on, Scorpio Midhaven as well, like just very like helping people to transform the dark parts, right? So yeah. And I think in creativity, that's really important, because we're all afraid about creating and sharing those vulnerable parts, like we talked about with the mammal versus the plant analogy. So I think that that's specifically what I love to help is, let's look at the dark parts, fill it with love, to then, so that you can then just to share with the world.
I love that. I think we've kind of lost some of the words because your connection is a little bit interrupted, but hopefully we've captured the essence that we should all have the courage to love ourselves. Ultimately, it comes down to that, leading our life with more love. Thank you for sharing your story and for having the courage to lead the way when it comes to setting the example for a new type of entrepreneurship, new type of leadership, and new type of co-creation with nature. Because I think this is the future. All of us returning back to living with nature and understanding how to be connected, not just with one another on a deeper level, but also with nature that surrounds us. There's a reason it's called Mother Nature. And I think we have been slowly but surely returning to that maternal presence and looking with more protective and loving eyes to nature that surrounds us everywhere. Do we still have you on, Jake? We have lost Jake to the jungle. One more time.
Stella, I'm sorry. Thank you so much and everything. Like, I figure you were wrapping up or something. The tethering doesn't work so well for my phone, so it like kicked off the signal at some point. And then I realized, I was like, oh, I'm not connected, but somehow I can still hear her talking. And I tried to reconnect and it kicked me out.
Hopefully
So,
it's
but
captured our conversation, even though it had some interruptions.
good.
Thank you for
No,
joining.
this was amazing. It's been a pleasure, and you did such a great job on the way you organized it all. So thank you so much. It was probably the best podcast I've been on.
I will quote you on that.
Quote me.
Send
You're
my
welcome to.
regards to the plants, and I am excited to follow your journey. And I would encourage everyone to follow you on LinkedIn because you're posting daily vlogs from the jungle, and they're filled with information about plants, about the animals, and about nature, and about living in community, which is really the future. So hopefully this is what 2025 brings us more of, more voices like yourself tuning in from different parts of the world, encouraging us to be more one at one with ourselves and with each other. So thank you.
Aw, amazing. Thank you so much, Stella. Excited to keep supporting each other, and I'll see everyone on LinkedIn or in the
Yes.
jungle.
Or in the jungle. See you on LinkedIn or in
Yeah.
the jungle. Thank you for listening.